Okay, so I just started up Maya, or Photoshop. And in Photoshop, I have the documents. Now, when we are outputting an object, so if I were to go into Maya here, and if I were to just look at my plane, so if I go to UVs, UV editor, oh, conveniently a plane lays flat off across my 0 to 1 grid in my layout. So that's great. So I don't even need to, but I will for now. I'm going to go into my images, to a UV snapshot, and I'll do this as a PNG. I'll bring it into where I live, and under texture. Alright, and now I'm going to just type in UV demo. Okay, so now I have this. I'm going to change this to be about a 1024 by 1024 and hit apply. Now it shouldn't look like it did anything. If I minimize that, I should see that it did create that. So now under Photoshop, I'll just go to File, and I will go to Open, and I'll go to where I worked, which is my work volume, and I'll grab that one. So under my textures, that's bananas. Let me grab that. Okay. So, hard to see. Let's change that. Let's go to our effects, stroke, and now we can kind of see it a little bit better. If you need to change it to a color so it stands out more, cool. Just don't let that color influence what you're doing. I like to usually keep it like black or something like that, just because I know it's easier to work with. If you need to increase that, you can change your size. If we go on center and increase the size of it, it'll really make that pop. So I'm going to keep that at 1, hit OK. All right, let me make a new layer. With this new layer, I'm going to say that I'm going to make a color. And to make a color this time, I'm not going to use my gradient in my effects. I'm going to use a gradient over here. That's this icon. So if we hover over that, it'll show you literally how that tool works. So if I click on gradient tool, I'm going to open that up to pick a different one. And I'm going to pick, let's do two-tone. And right now it's set up to black to white. If I click on it, it'll change. So I'm going to click on this little box here. And let's just change this. We'll go green. And then this one will change to yellow. And again, this isn't banana. This is just me showing you some techniques. So I've hit OK. It didn't do anything yet. I just changed the color of it. To drag out a gradient, if I just left click and drag, okay, it made a gradient. And it starts with this value and it goes over to the other one. So from your first click to letting go, that's how that goes in arrangement. Now we could flip that. So if I tell it to reverse and I draw that out, so from yellow to green now. Okay. Fun. What if I were to change some settings inside of this? I don't have to just do two tones in here. If you ever need to undo, remember that's Control-Z. So I'm going to click somewhere in between these. I'm going to click right here. Okay, I have another value that I can add. I'm going to change that to red. Okay, hit OK. Okay, so now we have this gradient going and transitioning between these two tones. What if we wanted to make it so this one right here in the middle had a quicker change from green to red? Well, if I were to click somewhere around here, and I sample it, so if I'm inside of my area on top, so somewhere inside of the gradient, if I click somewhere here, I'm sampling. Also, I got rid of my red, so there we go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and add another color. So sample green. It's because I have that one active. We first click anywhere else, and then now sample green. All right, so I got another one. If I move that closer to here, I can start that gradient or modify how that ramps up. I can also, when we back up a little bit more, Or if I don't want this one to be here, just left click, drag it down, and it goes away. So now that I have this, if I were to left click and drag, I can change the value of that. This should be just like in Adobe Illustrator. So you can adjust how these gradients are being implemented in Photoshop just by clicking and dragging those little spots there. So now I have a different gradient on my my texture. So let's say I need to make this go from left to right, top to bottom. I just left click and drag. Let's say I need to make a complete vertical or horizontal layout for my gradient. If I hold down the shift key while I'm drawing out, it's going to keep it either straight up and down or left to right. Okay, so that's gradients. Let's say that we, for whatever reason, like this one right here. We want to keep that, so we can call that our gradient. And let's say that this is part of our base colors that we're working on for whatever object that is. Well, if we know that this is going to be our colors for our texture, let's name that colors. So I'm going to make a folder. You can either click on this icon here and drag that in. So I just left clicked, dragged this into my folder. Or I don't like having to wait that long. I can, let me drag that out. You'll notice you're dragging something out of something if you see that double line. Hit delete. All right, if I hit Control G, I can make a group. And that's usually how I usually work to make groups. So have a layer selected, hit Control G. Now, I'm gonna change this to color. All right, now I'm gonna make another layer. I'm gonna get that out of the group. You'll notice anytime you add a new layer and you're on that group or you're working somewhere in that group, it'll keep that inside of this group. To prevent that from happening, make sure you're out of that group and press layer and you'll just make another one. Let me make sure I name this one UV so I can keep track of that. From this one, I'm going to make a gradient that's black to white. And I'm going to just draw that up. I'm going to call this one specular. And I'm going to group that. Control G. Spec. Okay. Now, let's try something new. I'm going to make another layer. Drag that out of there. And I'm going to fill this layer with white. So edit, fill. I want it to be foreground color. And then now I'm going to go ahead and use an FX. And let's put in pattern. Okay. I'm going to go something like this. So now, I'm going to put this in a group as well. We'll call this bump. So now I have three different things. I have a color, I have a spec, and a bump. Let's save these things out. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to make sure I keep this in a folder, so I'll call this my banana project. And for this one, we're going to use a targa. What are the benefits of using a TGA file? Well, they load super fast. And they are lossless. JPEGs are lossy or they lose quality. So a targa file is way better to use, and almost every 3D application can read a TGA file. So that is a good thing. What I'm going to do first, before I even save this, turn off my UVs. I got color. I'll go to File, Save As, TGA, Banana Project, and we'll call that color. Actually, let me put my name in there. Color, and then something like text would be good. If you look at our write-up, if I can even find that, there we go. So materials, last name banana, texture, color texture, good. So as long as we keep things named correctly so we can find it, that's the whole goal. So I'm going to do, keep this where it's asking you, do you want this to be what resolution? 24 bits, we'll keep that. Let's turn this next one on. So spec, save as, TGA. And we'll call that spec. And again, okay. And then now last but not least, we'll do a bump. And BUMP. Okay. Let's go back to Maya. So I got this thing. I want to make a material for it. So if I go into my Hypershade, which is open already for me, under my AI standard, we'll use that. Let's give it a name. Never keep this as what it's being labeled as, which is just AI standard surface 1. We're going to call this, this will just be my class demo, and then I'm going to use MAT just to denote that this is a material. And then now, underneath my color, I'm going to open up my load file. So I'm going to load up my, I threw it in here, that's bananas, and here we go. So I got my color. Let's open that. Okay. Now, let's load up my specular. I'm going to go to the create render node. Okay. We'll give this a look in a second here. And then now, I need to load something else, and this is going to be called, under geometry, bump mapping. So I'm going to open up, go to File, open up the bump value. We'll click on this, and then this, and now we'll open that one up. Ew. Let's see what it did. Nothing. Well, let's make sure hardware texturing is on, and then now, right-click, assign material to selection, and I made this. Now, what is this doing? Well, let me eliminate the stuff on there. It's trying to simulate some bump. It's not the nicest looking, but it's trying to push and pull some of the texture. Now, a bump map does not actually push it in 3D space. It kind of just simulates some shadows and depth on an object. When we're looking at it, you can see how that changes from our light sources. It looks definitely a lot bumpier over from this side. We have a harsh light really hitting from over here. So, interesting. Let's try something else. I'm going to go into here and I'm going to delete out my connections. So I'm going to just left-click drag across here to delete some of this. I just want my specular value to be on. And I also want this to be, for color, let's just give it a different color so it pops a little bit more. Okay. Just so it's visible. Let's see what this did. Hard to tell, but there's more specular on one side than another. We can kind of, if we start to rotate this, start to get that. Let's really pronounce that. Specular out here. Okay, so now I'm going to have this show me there we go. You guys got questions back there? So if I move this, you should be able to see the specular starting to pop. I don't know if it's that visible. on your compressed screen, but you should see a little bit of, is that showing up a little bit, the texture? No? Just a little bit? Yeah, okay. You'll see this definitely be more noticeable when we start adding it to some other spots. Maybe this was a weird one to use, but you can sort of see it catching where there's some of that texture that I added for this material on that. So what we're going to do is try to figure out how to add color, bump, and specular on a banana. And now I want to go over one last thing before we start to do that. I want to bring up some references. You notice I have a lot of references. That's not a banana. But I do have a lot of references of bananas that I was looking at here. And I also was looking at stuff from the interwebs. So I typed in banana. And I started looking at what references I could use while I'm painting this thing up. The first goal before you even start to texture is to gather up a bunch of pictures of bananas. Now, you don't need a million of them. That would be kind of crazy, but you just need enough to be able to make a reference page. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to go into, let's just say that it's like Web, and let's go Large Web, Create, and I'll just be pasting these things in here. I don't need them to be gigantic like this. I can scale these down. I just want this to be visible enough so I can use these to be able to look at while I'm texturing. And that's definitely high enough of a res for me to use that one. And again, all I'm doing, going on the internet, gathering enough pictures that can help me texture. So I got another one. Let's just go into Photoshop, paste it, move that one over. Now, how do you scale these things? Control T will allow for you to scale these images. For those of you who haven't used Photoshop that much, it should allow for you to quickly be able to modify and layer these things out. Once we're done, you will save this. And this is something I want submitted for me to be able to see, is just a JPEG of this. So gather a lot of references of this, and then when you start to paint, you won't see this in the video because it's going to go on the other screen, but you can left-click, drag this over, and now you have your artboard over here for reference, and then you have your actual texture size over here, or your texture sheet that you'll be using. All right, let's talk brushes. I'm going to hide these. Nope, not going to hide those. We're going to hide these. All right, let's say that I was working on a banana. I'm going to go and I'm going to hit the I button for an ink dropper, selecting this yellow tone, and making sure I'm in this artboard. If I hit Shift F5, that'll paste the color or fill. And I can also do that if I go to Image, or let's see, Edit Fill. And Edit Fill will allow for you to pull in that color. So ink dropper, which is I to sample, and then Edit Fill, or Shift F5 to put that color in there. So if I'm using a tablet, which you guys should be having one of those by now, or at least by next class, this tablet is what we will use to actually get this thing to texture. Now, for me right away, I'm noticing when I move my tablet, it's going on both screens. So you always have to change the tablet settings by default when it sets up. So just type in WAC in your search. It should pull up your tablet properties. I'm going to go into my mapping, make sure that it is only on monitor 2 for me. It might be flipped for you guys. And then now that should be enough to get going. What I'm going to do before I close this is I'm going to test my pressure. If I push down on my tablet, I should see that changing. And I know Scott has asked you guys to get a tablet as well for ZBrush. There's no way you can use ZBrush without that. I'm going to close this. All right, I have my base layer, so I'm going to call this base color again. And now, let's say that I wanted to paint some little spots on my banana. Well, I need to sample more of like a brown or something that would make more sense. So I'm going to use a sample of a brown, and I'm going to go into my brush properties. So right now for the brushes that I'm using, it's just a default general brush. Let's change that. I'm going to go into, let's try wet media brushes. And I'm going to try this one right here. So this is Kyle's something something brush. Kyle Ultimate Inking Thick and Thin. So let's see what this does when I draw on it. I'm just going to go from left to right. Okay, okay, let me see. So the less pressure, more pressure, it's doing something like that. Okay, that's interesting. Now, you don't always necessarily want to be working in Photoshop with brushes the same way that you would if you were illustrating in Photoshop. Sometimes you don't want a brush to be totally representative of what your hand's doing. Maybe you need to take advantage of certain settings of the brush. So for me, I'm going to go into this setting right here. I'm going to press this button, and it brings up my brush settings. And right away under brush tip shape, if I increase my spacing, that means when I draw, it's going to give me little droplets on there. Kind of cool. That can allow for me to organically get some shapes on there. I'm going to leave spacing low. You might notice too when you're drawing, if it looks pixelated, that's likely because you had your spacing on wrong. So check, open this up, change the spacing. Okay, shape dynamics. Shape dynamics are what's determining the transfer of your brush to the page. And right now under pen pressure, that's our size jitter. We can increase or decrease that size jitter. I'm actually going to increase that just to see what that changes for me. Okay, I kind of like how that's a little more organic looking. And I'm going to leave that alone. Under texture, we also can play with a lot of different settings. I wouldn't go super in-depth with this one yet. I would start to experiment. And I think really the shape dynamics and brush tip shape, those are the first two you should be focusing on. So now if I were to start to paint, let me just start painting some little dots around here. And okay, I can see how that can be little spots on here, but notice the level of saturation. Notice how much that's filling up on my screen. It's because my flow and opacity is set to 100%. If I drop my flow down and start to paint, oh, that's kind of cool. What this is doing for me is allowing...
What's the difference between like flow and opacity?
Think about it as like how much, I guess, paint would be on the tip of your brush. So opacity is going to give you 100% output, but the flow is how much is actually being transferred onto the screen. So if I drop my opacity and I have flow down, it should look a lot lighter. So both of these kind of work together to give us some interesting details. What I like to do sometimes on things like this is to actually take that and then layer it up a couple times. Notice right away, this looks so much more like what we're looking at over here, especially, let me bring this over so the video can see it. Like these little spots. I can sort of see that happening on here compared to just these really large chunky pieces. So the good news is it's digital and we can hit the E key and send it away and just hit delete. Okay, so we're seeing some bruises here that look similar to that. What else can we do? Well, if I use the B key and I'm going to increase my opacity and I'm going to go from left to right. Okay, that's maybe a little too intense for me. So let's drop our size of our brush. Now, your button where your index finger rests on your brush, if we were to left click that button, so it's the button closest to the Wacom tablet surface, press that, you can change your size by scrolling this number. So left click dragging. I'm going to reduce that. There's another way we can change our size too. So let's say that that's too small, I'm not seeing anything. That's getting better. Let's say that we need to change this. So right now, here's my size. If I use the bracket close on my keyboard, it's right above the enter key, I'll get a bigger size. If I use bracket open, it makes a smaller one. So this one is going to make small. This one, big. Okay, so let me erase these guys. And now, let me see how my brush is doing. Okay, spacing's pretty good. I'm going to reduce that size jitter now because I want to try and get a line that goes across. I just want to kind of emulate what that's doing. And if you're trying to do this and you're going from left to right, maybe that's not going to work. If you hit the R key on your keyboard, you can rotate your canvas. So it's going to more naturally allow for you to draw. So if we rotate, maybe now if we want to go diagonally, that works a little bit better for you. So rotate, the R key, allows for you to be able to change the orientation of your canvas, which is great because now you can get some of those lines and hard edges there that may not work normally for you. Okay, so now that I'm painting these things out, I'm just going to press the B key and I'm just going to draw a shape that goes across. That's starting to look a little bit like these slashes. So I'm going to go a little bit bigger and do that again. And I'm also going to rotate so I'm at an angle. And let's see if we can get that again. So from left to right. And then maybe that's cool, but there's not enough texture built into that. I'm going to use my eraser tool to erase some of this out. What I can do is change my erase. So I hit the E key to erase. And I'm going into my settings. I'm going to go into Kyle's Paintbox Wet Blender. And I'm going to use that to see if I can just pull. Okay, so this is actually a blend tool, which is actually smudging some of that, which actually may be a fun thing to experiment with later on. So I'm going to go back in time before I wreck that. And I'm going to change this one out to Real Oils. Okay. That's not going to do it either. Let's go with a dry medium brush. Let's turn that one on, and Kyle's Ultimate Hard Pencil. I think that'll be a good one. I'm going to increase the size on that, and then start to... you don't want to erase either. Let's switch you out. Okay, let's do Kyle's Eraser Natural Edge. Let's see if this one works. So increase that size, and then start to erase. Okay, right away, I'm liking how that's going because it's starting to look a little bit more like some of these spots where they erase out or they fade out. So if I play this correctly and if I plan this, if I have this stroke starting out, if I go to the edges of these and I drop my flow, let's see what this does. I'm going to use the erase tool and just draw over this. I'm just tapping lightly with my Wacom tablet over certain pieces, and we're starting to get a little bit more of an organic shape to this. So this is how we'll start to build out some of these colors and these forms from our banana. Now, all of these can be accomplished using these natural brushes and these techniques. What I want us to do is experiment with our brush, see what you can do, and realize too, if you label your brush strokes, so we know all of this is our brush strokes, just name that. So we know maybe this is, you can even divide it, so maybe it's little dots and then strokes. So just name this whatever you feel that could help you create. Once this is all done, you'll take both of these. So if you hold down the Shift key while selecting your layers, so left click, hold down Shift, select this one while still holding down Shift, and then press the folder button, and now you'll group that. And then again, that can be colored. Okay, let's see if we can get some banana started.